U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday criticized the day's Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity, which has largely been seen as a win for his election rival, former President Donald Trump.
This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law.
In calm, measured remarks from the White House, Biden said the ruling set a, quote, dangerous precedent.
For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone.
The U.S. Supreme Court found on Monday in a 6-3 ruling that Trump cannot be prosecuted for any actions that were within his constitutional powers as president, but can be for private acts. It's a landmark ruling recognizing for the first time any form of presidential immunity from prosecution, but stops short of allowing absolute immunity for all official acts, as Trump's lawyers advocated. The decision means it's unlikely Trump will be tried before the election on charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith over his efforts to undo his 2020 election loss to Joe Biden, one of 4 criminal cases Trump has faced. On Monday, Biden said the public has a right to know the results of that prosecution before November's election.
Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation.
Biden's remarks were also his first from the White House since his shaky debate against Trump last week, which led to calls for the 81-year-old to withdraw from the race. After stumbling over his words at the Atlanta debate, Biden is being closely scrutinized for signs that he is up to the job of running for re-election and of governing the country for 4 more years.
Following appointments to the executive.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced his new coalition cabinet, including a job for the leader of what was the largest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance.
The Minister of Agriculture is John Steenhuisen.
Hello, how are you doing?
Ramaphosa's African National Congress was forced to join with rival parties to stay in power after losing its parliamentary majority for the first time in 3 decades in a May 29th election. And Sunday's announcement has followed weeks of protracted and at times acrimonious negotiations. Political analyst and former South African diplomat Melanie Verwoerd said what had emerged was a major shake-up with very few of the old faces still in there.
Like John Steenhuisen in agriculture, I don't know what he knows about agriculture apart from that you buy chickens in supermarkets. But I do understand why the DA fought for that. I think it's because they want to get some of the Freedom Front voters. That's one of the few growth points still for the DA.
Freedom Front is a smaller party with its base in white Afrikaans-speaking voters. The markets, which had welcomed inclusion of the business-friendly DA in South Africa's coalition government, responded favourably to the new cabinet. South African assets rose sharply on Monday. Some investors, however, said the gains were likely short-lived, as it would take time for the new government's agenda and performance to become clear. The reaction on the streets of Johannesburg was more mixed. While some welcomed the diverse and inclusive makeup of the executive, others, like Gomelemo Utemeleng, questioned the mix of different people with different philosophies.
I'm not really confident about it, but then they say the people of South Africa have spoken. Is that what they say they wanted? That's my question. I don't really support it fully, but hey, what can we do? Because at this point, I feel like we've spoken, but we're not being listened to.
Alongside the DA, Ramaphosa has made space for 5 other coalition parties in his cabinet. But now that the wrangling over portfolios is over, the government faces the more daunting task of governing. That's in the face of a struggling economy, crumbling roads and power stations, and high unemployment. Whether the coalition of former enemies can improve on the ANC's record may depend, analysts have said, on the extent to which they can set aside their ideological differences.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ruled that presidents have, quote, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution over what the justices said were, quote, official acts. in a critical case over whether Donald Trump can be charged for allegedly plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The landmark ruling recognizes, for the first time ever, any form of presidential immunity from prosecution. The 6-3 decision written by Chief Justice John Roberts split down partisan lines and threw out a lower court's decision rejecting Trump's claims of immunity from criminal charges. It ordered the lower court to evaluate which of the alleged crimes in the indictment were, quote, official and therefore immune from prosecution, and which were, quote, unofficial and potentially criminal. The Supreme Court's slow handling of the immunity case has already helped Trump by making it unlikely that any trial on charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith could be completed before the 2024 election.
Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
Smith indicted Trump in August of last year. Trump has pleaded not guilty. Trump's actions alleged in the indictment include efforts to fire and replace officials at the Justice Department, pressing Vice President Mike Pence to illegally reject state electoral votes, and working with state officials to concoct fraudulent slates of electors to support him. USA! USA! The special counsel also accused Trump of fueling his supporters' violent efforts to storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. But the Supreme Court ruled that a president has, quote, absolute immunity for decisions governing appointments within the executive branch, including at the Justice Department, and that his communications with the vice president and with his supporters could be viewed as official acts. Liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor excoriated the majority decision in a dissent, writing, quote, today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle, foundational to our Constitution and system of government, that no man is above the law. She added that the majority believed Trump should enjoy immunity from prosecution, quote, and so it invents an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity that puts the president above the law. Donald Trump praised the decision, writing on social media, quote, big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American. The 78-year-old is the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted, as well as the first former president convicted of a crime. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign said in a statement, quote, today's ruling doesn't change the facts, so let's be very clear about what happened on January 6th. Donald Trump snapped after he lost the 2020 election and encouraged a mob to overthrow the results of a free and fair election.
Victims of multiple attacks in Nigeria's Borno state were receiving treatment at this hospital in Maiduguri on Sunday. The day before, suspected female suicide bombers separately attacked a wedding, a funeral, and a hospital in the town of Gwoza, killing at least 18, according to the head of the local state emergency management agency. Barkindo Saidu said the death toll included children, adults, and pregnant women, and that 30 others were injured. No one has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Borno is at the center of a 15-year jihadist insurgency that has killed thousands of people and displaced millions more. Although the Nigerian military has degraded the militants' capabilities, they still carry out attacks against civilians and security targets. Boko Haram and its splinter group Islamic State West Africa Province are the most active militant groups in Borno. Borno State Police were not immediately available for comment.
Strong winds lashed Grenada on Monday as Hurricane Beryl made landfall in the Caribbean, churning into the Windward Islands and threatening devastating flooding and storm surges. The U.S. National Hurricane Center called the Category 4 storm an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation, as winds from Beryl reached 150 miles per hour, and it dropped up to 10 inches of rain in some areas. Michael Brennan is the Hurricane Center's director.
You can see the very well-defined eye in both visible and infrared satellite imagery. Beryl has re-strengthened this morning as it's gone through an eye wall replacement cycle. So now is when we're experiencing those catastrophic Category 4 wind conditions in portions of the Grenadines, places like Union Island, Palm Island, Petite Martinique, Petite St. Vincent, Carriacou.
The appearance of a major hurricane this early in the Atlantic hurricane season is rare. So is the quick strengthening of this storm, according to Christopher Rozoff, an atmospheric scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
It had a very intense shift in intensity from a Category 1 to Category 4 storm in less than 24 hours, making it one of the most impressive rapid intensification cases in Atlantic history. And we honestly have not seen any recorded storms perform such an intensification rate prior to September 1st in the history books. So for a storm to do this in late June is something we have not seen before.
The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines said he was expecting a natural disaster that could continue for days. Beryl is expected to continue thrashing the region throughout the week.
These are the chances of hurricane force winds. We're most concerned about downstream, about seeing hurricane force winds in Jamaica, and a hurricane watch has been issued for that island as of this morning. There is a potential for Beryl to remain a hurricane, a powerful hurricane across the Caribbean Sea. There is also a chance of hurricane force winds extending as far westward as to portions of the Yucatan Peninsula later this week.
The storm is currently moving to the west-northwest at 20 miles per hour.
A car drove into pedestrians near Seoul City Hall on Monday, killing 9 people and injuring at least 4 more, according to police and fire officials. Local broadcaster YTN-TV said that the car rammed into pedestrians standing on the crosswalk after hitting 2 other cars. Witness Park Sung-il described what they saw.
Even though people collapsed, the person in the passenger seat was only concerned about the driver and mentioned that there were clothes in the trunk. If only they'd used them to apply pressure quickly to those hit by the car, at least one person could have been saved. That one person probably died.
A police officer was administering CPR to a person on the ground at the site of the accident, according to a video given to Reuters by a witness. Temporary barricades were already up by Tuesday morning after the collision damaged pedestrian guardrails. Cho Hyun-ho runs a store near the site of the crash, and he said he still felt affected by the news.
My daughter called me because I run a store in front of the city hall, so I asked her what the accident was, and I heard it was a big accident. I mean, the car crash happened. This is how I found out. My heart at that time is still breaking.
According to police officials, the exact cause of the accident is still under investigation.
I'm proud of going to prison.
Influential Donald Trump ally Steve Bannon arrived at a Connecticut prison Monday to serve a 4-month sentence for defying a congressional subpoena from the committee that probed the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021. The right-wing media firebrand spoke to reporters before entering the facility.
I have not only no regrets, I'm actually proud of what I did, and I felt terrible if I didn't do it. Yes. I don't mind going to prison today.
The 4-month sentence could keep Bannon imprisoned almost until the November election, when Trump faces President Joe Biden for the White House. In 2022, Bannon was convicted of 2 misdemeanor counts of contempt of Congress. He was charged after he refused to turn over documents or testify to the Democratic-led House of Representatives committee investigating the Capitol riot by Trump supporters. Bannon, who was a key advisor to Trump's 2016 presidential campaign and a former chief White House strategist, is not the first Trump administration official to go to prison for refusing to cooperate with the committee. Peter Navarro, a former Trump trade advisor, reported to prison in March after he too was given a 4-month sentence.
Tell us what you think friends and foes around the world should know about American leadership today under President Biden.
Well, I think what the world knows, the world has experienced over 3.5 years, not one night, is exactly the kind of leadership that he's brought to bear on problems that are common for so many countries, particularly so many of the democracies around the world. And as I've seen it, again, going around the world, there's a desire, there's a thirst for American engagement, for American leadership. Even when we have disagreements with countries, they still want us in this and even leading to try to get to a better place. And they've seen a president who's reinvested America in the world, reinvested in these alliances, in these partnerships, in ways that they seek and want. What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is, again, people are looking at the last 3.5 years. They're looking at policies. They're looking at policy choices. And for the most part, they like the choices and the policies that this president's
Maxim Ringo and Yanis Lox became the first same-sex couple in Latvia to register their partnership on Monday. This landmark moment followed a new law which came into force at midnight. After the event at a legal office in the capital Riga, the couple exchanged silver rings at a party. They said they hoped to get gold rings if and when Latvia legalises same-sex marriage. Locks told Reuters he was happy that the government are recognising that their partnership exists.
I feel excited, kind of emotional about it as well, because it is for us a really big step, and not only for us, for the country itself. And being first, it's all the publicity that comes with it as well. It kind of is a bit, I would say, a bit stressful, but in the same time, I feel happy that we can finally do it.
Homosexuality remains a divisive topic in Latvia. In 2005, legislators changed the constitution to define marriage as only allowed between a man and a woman. But the Latvian parliament voted last November to formally legislate same-sex civil unions. This allowed people in such a partnership to have hospital visiting rights, as well as giving some tax and social security benefits. But gay rights activist Kaspars Žalietis says same-sex couples still face some hurdles.
The key things that are still missing are first an inheritance issue. That is a difficult issue to solve as it requires a large legislative changes. Also, nothing is done regarding the recognition of the same-sex couples that have been registered abroad. And obviously there is no issues tackled regarding the children that live in the same-sex families.
He said notary offices are now facing queues of same-sex couples who want to register their relationship as quickly as possible. The change in Latvia means there are now only 5 EU countries where people in same-sex relationships cannot register civil unions: Bulgaria, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia.